Okay, today we're gonna do daf Yudal from the Alpha. In the middle speaking about when is the time to check chametz. So we had a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi that after the time of chametz, after the time of beer, when you have to burn the chametz, which is b'chatzei starts, then you cannot check your house for chametz anymore. As opposed to Rabbanan say even if you can't eat chametz anymore, you still have a chiyuv to check the house for chametz. So, and we said that the reason of Rabbi Yehuda was that because since chametz is already aser, we're scared that if you're going to go check your house now for chametz, and if everyone are going to mechayiv you to check your house for chametz, you're going to find chametz and you're going to want to eat it. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda said you can't check your house for chametz anymore. Says the Gemara, we're going to start today at the bottom of that Yud on the base, all the way at the bottom. V'chi omi gazer, the second last line from the Amid, the last few words. Says the Gemara, omi gazer Yehuda. Is it true that Yehuda doesn't? How can we say that Yehuda was gazer? That we're scared you're going to find chametz and eat chametz when it's aser. But now we have a Mishnah that says, in the Mishnah Menachos that says, Mishikarav ha'emer yetzin umitzin shukei Yerushalayim sheim leim kamach v'kali. It says that there's a carbon called carbon ha'emer. Carbon ha'emer was a carbon that they brought, but the chiddush of carbon ha'emer was that it was matir all the new crop from that year. So you were asked to eat new crop until the carbon ha'emer was brought. After you brought carbon ha'emer, it becomes mutter. And you have to wait. After you brought carbon ha'emer, it's mutter. So it says in the Mishnah Menachos that when they brought the carbon ha'emer already, if you went outside in the marketplaces of Yerushalayim, you would find already wheat which is ready, flour and wheat which is ready to be eaten. So there's machlokes whether that's right. I mean, they had to cut the wheat and prepare the wheat, and the time was aser. So straight away, it's like by Pesach. Yeah, so you can't prepare the chametz. You can only start preparing the food after Pesach starts. So the Mishnah says that that's for chametz. But Pesach by carbon ha'emer, so the machlokes tanoi whether they were able to prepare the food before the iser, before the food was mutter ready, so it could be ready straight away, or are they not allowed to? So Chacham said, Tanakama says that it doesn't make sense that we should matter the shopkeepers to start preparing the wheat if it's still awesome. And Rabbi Yehuda says no. That Rabbi Yehuda's matter the shopkeepers of Yerushalayim to start selling the wheat as soon as the carbon ha'emer was brought, meaning they had to prepare the wheat already before, even though it was also to eat the wheat. From here we see from the fact that Yehuda says you can start preparing the wheat in the time that's also already. We see that Yehuda isn't geyser that if there's a time which is aser, we're not geyser that maybe you're going to come and eat from the wheat. So why regarding the chametz do we say you can't check your house for chametz because maybe you're going to eat the chametz? Around we could say Yehuda says that you're able to start preparing the wheat even though it's still aser to eat wheat. So we see Yehuda isn't geyser that when someone is busy with something, he might come to eat what he's busy with. Amar Rabba to the Mitzvah is shiny chadash. Chadash is different. The issur of chadash, the issur of eating new wheat, is different than chametz. Why? Since there's a heter, since there's a heker, it's recognized that when he cuts the wheat, it's still aser. So he's going to come to stop. He won't come to eat it. What does that mean? It means that part of the issur of chadash. A lot of people nowadays are still makbid on chadash, by the way. Part of the issur of chadash is a makbid because there's different reasons. But there's the issur of chadash, issur the issur of chadash. You can't eat new wheat. But you can't eat new wheat. You can't cut new wheat, and you can't produce new wheat. The only heter to cut the wheat before it's mutter to eat the wheat is if you cut it in an irregular way. The usual way you cut the wheat is with a sickle, I think it's called. But Rabbanan said that if you cut the wheat with your hands, when you just pick off wheat seeds, which was very common food in those days, you just pick off wheat seed, then it's mutter. So that's what we're saying. The Rabbi is saying when these people cut the wheat, these shopkeepers cut the wheat, so the wheat should be ready. You should have fresh flour ready when you're able to have the new wheat. They didn't cut the wheat with a sickle, they cut the wheat with their hand because it's still usher. It's still the Zman Yisure. It's still usher to cut the wheat. So the way they cut the wheat was with their hands. So if you're cutting your wheat with your hands, there's a clear recognition that it's still usher to eat wheat. And therefore, since there's a clear recognition it's still usher to eat wheat, you're not going to come to eat it. As opposed to chametz, there's nothing reminding you now that chametz is usher. And therefore, if you find chametz in your house, then you're going to come to eat it. Abaye said, okay, so you answered me. You said there's a hacker. When they cut the wheat, they're going to recognize that it's still usher to eat wheat because they're cutting it in an irregular way. Or when it comes to grinding the wheat, there's no hacker that when they're grinding the wheat that it's usher because you grind it in the regular way. So what's reminding them when they're grinding the wheat not to wait and not to eat the chametz and not to by mistake eat some wheat, some flour or wheat. Says the Gemara, lekash is not a question. Because why? Because tchina b'rechai the yad, harkada tchina b'rechai the yad. The Gemara answers that it's not true. We thought that when these shopkeepers grinded the wheat, they grinded it in a regular way. The Gemara says no. Even grinding, they have to do it in a special way. Meaning they have to use a hand grinder as opposed to a wind. How do you call it? The wheel, the windmill. Meaning before the time of Issa starts, you cannot use a windmill. You can't use your hand. So someone is only using his hand, so it's going to remind him that the reason why he's using his hand is because it's still usher to eat wheat. And so to by kada, so to when it comes to sifting the wheat, aligabi nafa, they have to sift it in a special way. Not the regular way they sifted the wheat, to remind them that it was us. Okay, so we answer the contradiction between the Mishnah Menachah that says you could deal with wheat, meaning you're able to start working on wheat even though the wheat is usher, and Yehuda says, Yehuda agrees with that, and we're not going to eat the wheat. And our Mishnah Pesachim that says you can't check the chametz after the chametz is usher because you're going to eat it. It's a contradiction. And our answer, that's not a contradiction because the Gabe, when it comes to the wheat story, the wheat Mishnah. So there's always things reminding you the way you're acting, you're dealing with the wheat. So when it comes to the cutting the wheat, you have to cut it in a special way. So when it comes to grinding the wheat, you have to grind it in a special way. So when it comes to sifting the wheat, you have to come in a special way. So all these things are reminding you that's us. Shaking chametz, it does nothing to remind you that's us, and therefore you are going to come to eat it. Says Abaye, I'm going to ask from a different Mishnah, a different contradiction. Says Kaitzrin Beis HaShlachin. It says there's a certain type of field called Beis HaShlachin. Beis HaShlachin is a field that has to be watered by hand. I mean, it needs much more water than rainwater, and therefore you have to water it by hand. So the Mishnah says Menachas Kaitzrin Beis HaShlachin, that when it comes to a field called Beis HaShlachin, a field that needs a lot of water, you're able to cut the wheat. And so too, wheat inside wheat that's growing inside a valley. Oh, you're able to cut the wheat. The Mishnah says you're able to cut the wheat in a regular way. You don't. Before we said that if you're cutting in a regular field, you have to take off wheat with your hands. But the Mishnah says in Menachah is that if you're dealing with a field that needs a lot of water and a field that in the valley, you're able to cut the wheat in a regular way. And the reason for that is because the wheat in these types of fields isn't it's not a field. The wheat in these types of fields is not a good wheat, so people don't usually buy it. So therefore, we won't geyser for cutting the wheat. But in this type of field, if you cut the wheat, you cut in a regular way. You're able to cut the wheat, but even though it's usher still, but you can't pile the wheat. You can't make it into bundles. And we said the Mishnah, the Menachos over there says the Mishnah goes according to Yehuda. How can you answer this? Before we said that the reason why the Yehuda was matzah to cut the wheat before the time of the Isser, before is before it's mutter, is because there's always you're cutting the wheat in a special way. So it's reminding you that's usher. What about this type of field that you're not cutting the wheat in a special way? And we're still said that it's mutter. So how do we deal with that? There's nothing reminding you when you're cutting the wheat in these fields. There's nothing reminding you that the wheat's still usher, because you don't have to cut it in a regular way. You don't have to cut it in a not regular way. You could cut it the regular way. And Yehuda still said it's mutter. If the reason for Yehuda was that we're not going to eat it because this thing remind you that's usher. So when it comes to a field that's not reminding you that's usher, Yehuda should have said that's usher. El Amar Abaye, so Abaye answers, Chadash Bad Mineh. No. We're going back on the answer. We said before that the difference between chametz and wheat was that by wheat, there's things that remind you that's aser. Mashaying chametz is nothing to remind you that it's aser. Abai said that's not a good answer. We just saw that in the fact that even there's nothing to remind you that it's aser, it's still mutter. Abai says chadash bad mineh chametz bad mineh. The answer to the contradiction is in explaining the difference between chametz and chadash. The issur of chadash is the issur that everyone knows that's aser, and since the whole year you don't eat from it because you have to wait until the carbon emet. So everyone knows that's asa, and you don't you end up people are regular not to eat wheat. They know that's us to eat wheat, and no one eats wheat. Then when it comes to chametz, you're eating wheat for you're eating chametz for most of the year. You're eating chametz for 365 days minus 8 days a year. So the whole year you're eating chametz. So when it comes to chametz, you're so regular to eating chametz that you don't. You're not. If you're going to see chametz, you're going to naturally come to eat it. When it comes to wheat, everyone knows that's us already, so you won't come to eat the wheat. So there's no contradiction. Amar Rava says, Rava asked the question. Rabbi Yehuda Kash. Okay, so we asked the contradiction between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yehuda. We just said that the Mishnah Menacha says that the Mishnah Menacha says you're able to deal with wheat, you're able to grind wheat and deal with it, even though wheat's aser. So we see that the Yehuda is not good, you're going to eat the wheat. And in our Mishnah, in Pesachim says, the Yehuda says you can't check for chametz because we're scared that you're going to eat the chametz. So we see that's a contradiction. We see that Yehuda says that once something is aser, we're scared you're going to eat it. So we answer that contradiction. The chametz is different than chadash. Chadash people are used to not eating from, and chametz people aren't used to. But says Rabbi, okay, so you answer the question on the Yehuda and the Yehuda. But the Rabban like Asha, you have a question on the Rabbanan itself. Because Rabbanon in Lagabe Chadash says that what? Which is the opposite. Rabbanon Lagabe Chadash says you can't deal with the wheat. They argue with it. You can't deal with the wheat in time when it's us. When it comes to chametz, said you could deal with chametz. You could look for chametz. So how do you deal with that? So the contradiction of chametz is different than Chadash. Answers Rabbi Yehuda, but I can't answer the contradiction to Rabbanon because Rabbanon by say complete opposite. Rabbanon say by Chadash when it comes to new wheat, it's also to deal with it. And when it comes to chametz, they say it's mutter. And we can't answer that. Chadash people usually know that's aser, and chametz don't know it's aser because by Chadash, Rabbanan said complete faket. Rabbanan said that's aser, and by chametz, he said it's mutter. So Rabbi answers the new answer. The contradiction between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yehuda is not a contradiction. The answer before that Lagabe Chadash, everyone knows that's aser. So Rabbanan one guys, you're going to come to eat the stuff. You can still deal with it. Chametz people aren't regular. That's aser. So Rabbi Yehuda was extra machmir and said you can't deal with chametz. So that's not a contradiction. How do you answer the contradiction of Rabbanan and Rabbanan? The contradiction between Rabbanan and Rabbanan is also not a contradiction. Is not a contradiction. Why? Because very simple. Who by chametz? Who atze machs al v'serfe? Mecha kachem minei. Rabbanan tell you like this regarding wheat. He's making wheat. He's preparing wheat for the new season, right? So he's preparing wheat for the new season. What's in his brain? When in his mind is that there's a new season coming, which is mutter to eat wheat, and therefore he's preparing wheat for the new season. So for sure he might come to eat the wheat because his mindset is that there's a new season coming, which is mutter, and therefore he might come to eat it. But chametz, his mindset is completely opposite. But chametz, what's his mindset? Why is he looking for chametz? Because chametz is he knows that as soon as he can find chametz, why is he checking his house for chametz? To burn it. So you're telling me that someone's going to check his own house for chametz to burn it, and then when he finds chametz, he's going to come to eat it? Doesn't make sense. Obviously, it makes sense because Rabbi Yehuda says is chayyish for such a thing. But Rabbanan tell there's no contradiction between Chadash and chametz. By Chadash, he's preparing wheat for the new season, so he might come to eat it. By chametz, he's not trying to prepare chametz for the new season. By chametz, he's trying to get rid of the chametz. So he's running around his whole house. Every single second he's running around his house. It's recognizable that he's running around his house to get rid of the chametz. And you tell him when he finds chametz, he's going to come eat it? For sure not. And therefore, Rabbanan said that even after the time of Isser comes, you can still check for your chametz. We mentioned yesterday already that the Rabbanan, when it comes to on Pesach, everyone agrees you can't check your house for chametz on Pesach. If you never checked your house, after Pesach, you can't check your house for chametz on Pesach. You have a big problem. But we're speaking now Erev Pesach. Erev Pesach is not an Isser Kares yet, so it's different dinner. But Rabbanan said that even after the Isser of chametz starts in Erev Pesach, you still have to check your house. There's no contradiction between chametz and chadash regarding the two missions. Because Rabbanu will answer you, Rabbi Huda will answer you that legabe chametz, people are used to eating chametz all year, so people are gonna forget much easier. Masechta regarding Potash is anyway also for half a year, so that one extra day doesn't make such a big difference, and people know that's us already. And one answer, by Potash it's going to become mutter, and therefore you might make a mistake and eat it. By Pesach, everyone knows that you're checking your house for chametz, so Pesach we're going to get rid of it, so therefore no one's going to come to eat. That is one way to answer the contradiction. Rashi says Rabbi Yehuda leikasha. The contradiction we asked between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yehuda is not a question. Why? Because kamach v'kali not. What is in the Mishnah? It says in the Mishnah that they're able. What are they able to prepare for the new season? They're able to prepare kamach, flour, and kali. Kali is like roasted, cooked, baked, roasted wheat seeds, roasted flour, roasted wheat seeds. So the Mishnah says that you're only able to prepare. The Mishnah mentioned what are the things you're able to prepare for the new season? Kamach, v'kali, flour and roasted seeds. So Rabbi says flour is not edible, and roasted seeds is also until they're ready and not edible. So therefore, regarding when it comes to chadash, they're anyway not edible already. So no one's going to come to eat them. Pesach is edible. Says the Gemara, how does that make sense what Rashi just said? It's like a joke. Okay, so when they come, after it becomes flour and before it becomes roasted, completely roasted, it's not edible. But the seeds by themselves, plain seeds, before you made them flour, there's a whole process of making flour. First, cut the flour, cut the thing, then you have to sift it, and then you have to take the seeds off the peels. Wheat seeds were a very common thing to eat in those days. When it's still soft, it's fine to eat. So for sure you're going to come to eat. What's Rashi saying? You're not going to come to eat because it's not edible. There's a stage in the process that's for sure edible. If you're going to tell me and if you're going to tell me that since you cut the field, since you cut the wheat, the chatchila with your hands, it's going to remind you that it's still usher, and you're not going to come to eat the seeds. You can't tell me that either, because we just brought a case before that there are some cases that you don't have to cut the field with your hands. You can cut it with a sickle. Why? For example, cases like when it comes to wheat growing inside a valley and wheat growing inside a field that needs a lot of water, that we said you don't even have to cut it with a sickle. So there's nothing reminding you that the wheat is awesome. I can tell me it's not edible. It is edible. Obviously, when it comes to flour, it's not edible. But before it comes to flour, the seed is still edible. That which Ravashi said is a joke. Bedusi is like, it's a way the Gemara is basically throwing away an answer and saying it doesn't make any sense. Obviously, we know that everything in Torah is exact. And the Rabbi has said a lot of times that even when the Gemara says Bedusi, it doesn't mean that we're making fun. It's not true. The Gemara is saying that Torah, this thing is not true. So it's a different angle. It's not that he didn't know what he's talking about, and it's like a joke. The Pesachim Bedusi is like a joke. Bedusi. But the Rabbi said he brought it from his father a lot of times that even when Torah says that this is a joke, it's not. We're not saying it's a joke. Torah is saying it's a joke. So something about like this. I'm asking further on the every single place that aren't every Yehuda was grazer and every like chametz, right? What did we answer before? We answered that chametz people are usually eating the whole year round, so therefore Yehuda was grazer not to check chametz when it's awesome. Is that true? Is that a fact that every time people are used to eating things Yehuda is grazer that we should stay away from them? But now we have a Mishnah in the Shabbos that says, I guess some of you learned already. It says, "L'yikev adam mishrei feresh al beitza." In those days, the person had to. Right, they didn't have any light bulbs, so they had to have oil lamps. How do you have oil lamps? So there's two different ways of making it. Either you can make a cup full of oil and put a wick inside, or another way they used to do it was they used to have a wick, meaning and need lots of oil. When oil runs out, you need more oil to come in. So what they used to do was they used to take an egg, they used to empty out, someone get the yolk out. They used to fill the egg with oil, poke a hole inside the egg, and then the oil of the egg would drip into a light bulb, and that would sustain the oil lamp with oil to consume for the fire. So the Mishnah Shabbos says, a person should not make a hole inside the egg, and fill it up with oil, and put it next to the candle so the oil should drip into the candle, so it should drip into the candle. A person should not do that. Why not? Like Mara says, because the Zera, maybe you're going to need some oil on Shabbos, and you're going to take oil from the egg and use the oil. The problem is that the oil you already designated for the egg, the whole share in itself. But if I take an egg on Shabbos, Erev Shabbos, and I fill it up with oil, the oil I put in the egg, it's oil ready. It's as if the oil, since I set in my mind that oil should be for the fire, it's as if that oil is part of the fire. And if I'm going to take some of that oil away on Shabbos, I'm going to need oil. I'm going to take, let's say, a spoon of oil out of the egg. It's as if I'm over an Issa Mechaba. It's as if I'm diminishing the candle. Why? Because when I designate, in my eyes, a candle is this egg, is this of the candle. It's as if the egg is burning red. Even though the egg isn't burning, the egg is all dripping into the candle. But when I take oil away from the candle, it's as if I'm taking oil away from a lit candle. And if I take oil away from lit candle, I'm diminishing the time span that the candle is supposed to light by however much oil I took out. And that's Issa Mechaba. Mechaba doesn't only mean putting out a candle. Mechaba also means diminishing the light span of a candle. So in this case, I'm diminishing the light span of a candle, and therefore I'm over Mechaba. This is a huge discussion. We'll go through this also. I'm not going to get into this now, but the Nukuda we're trying to bring out over here, the Chachamim say that a person is going to take oil from this egg. I feel like even if I do the same idea with an earthenware cup, I fill up an earthenware cup with oil, and earthenware is oil and clay don't go together, so it's going to ruin the oil. So I'm anyway not going to come. It's not such a big chance of me taking oil outside the earthenware cup and using it for food, but still, I said keep away from it and don't do this. But on the other hand, Rabbi says, Mati, Rabbi said is mutter. Using oil is a very regular thing. So why Rabbi Yehuda Geyser that why is Rabbi Yehuda Chesher that a person is going to come and use the oil from the candle? Regarding the chametz, we answered before that Rabbi Yehuda says since you're eating chametz the whole year round, if you're going to see chametz, you're going to use it, you're going to eat it. Why when it comes to oil, Shabbos, which you use oil the whole week round, suddenly now Rabbi Yehuda says we're not Geyser that you're going to take the oil from the candle, which is the Cheda contradiction. Again, speaking of Rabbi Yehuda's view on how to treat Isurim. Are we choshesh that since something isn't, the goal is very extreme. He says that since the whole year round you're used to you doing something, so you have a chiyuv now to keep away from that thing when it's asur. So the choshesh have a chiyuv now to keep away from this oil when if there's a chash that it's going to be asur to use the oil. So over there, different. And Yehuda says the Gemara says over there it's a Shabbos. It's a Shabbos. Everyone knows that it's a Shabbos is asur, and Shabbos is only once a week. It's very common. Everyone knows Shabbat is us. So since everyone knows Shabbat is us, so people are very careful, and therefore, you're going to take some of the candle and use it for your food. Says the Gemara, oh yeah, Shabbat is careful. So the Gemara is not going to bring a whole cases that we see Rabbi Yehuda himself treats Shabbos as a regular Isser, and that people are not careful on Shabbos. Rabbi, the Shabbos are Shabbos. Like I asked a question from Rabbi Yehuda in Shabbos itself. And then we asked a question from Pesachim, from Dikas Chametz to Shabbos. Now we're going to ask a question. So we answered that Shabbos is different than Pesachim. Shabbos is Shabbos, which everyone's used to, so everyone knows you can't use the oil from the candle Shabbos. And Pesachim, not everyone's used to. So therefore, it's once a year, and therefore people might come to your Shabbos. Oh yes, so if that answer is true, so now we're going to have to answer a whole bunch of different contradictions in Shabbos itself, where we see in one place Rabbi Yehuda's machmir, and one place we see Rabbi Yehuda's maker. Says the Shabbos are Shabbos. Like I asked a question from Shabbos itself, the Tanya of learning, and it says like this. As is of kosher on Shabbos, the person cannot tie a knot, or untie a knot, which is a knot shal kayama. Yeah, which is if he knows that if he's going to tie this knot now, it's going to be there forever. Forever is a relative doesn't have to mean forever. Forever means it's going to be there for a long space of time. It's also for him to tie the knot on Shabbos. So the Brisa says, "Chavel dli shenifsak." If you have a rope of a dli, if you have a rope of a jug by a well, if you have a well, you have to lower the jug into the well. What if the string that's tying the jug, that's tied to the jug, snaps? So it's also for you to tie the knot back on Shabbos. You can't tie the knot back. Why? Because since the string for a well, the string tying the jug to is a permanent thing. Yeah, I'm tying the strings that should be there for a long time. So any knot I'm going to make in this, on this jug is going to be a kasher shakriyam. So if the string snaps, it cannot be tied on Shabbos because it's called a permanent knot. What should you do? Make a bow. A bow doesn't count as a knot, according to Tanakama. Since a bow doesn't count as a knot, then even though it's going to be for a long space of time, but you're not making a knot. Since you're not making a knot, then it's mutter. That's Tanakama's opinion. If Yehuda Eimer, this is what's going to get to us. Yehuda says, Kedich alav hunda ipiska ubevad shalei adven. Yehuda says you can't make a knot in Shabbos. What should you do? You should tie. I don't know. Stick both things together and somehow tie, wrap something round. Get some tape. I don't know exactly. Get another string basically to wrap around. You can't make any knots, but you could tighten the string. So somehow it could be together. Ubevad shalei adven. Make sure not to make any bows. What do we see from here? Yehuda says it's us to make a bow on Shabbos. Why is it us to make a bow on Shabbos? Says no problem making a bow on Shabbos. Yehuda says it's mutter to make a bow on Shabbos. Kasha and Yehuda, we have a steer between Yehuda and Yehuda. Why? Because at least according to Havamina, the Gemara thought that the reason why it's us to make a bow on Shabbos is because we're scared that you might make a knot. So from here we see that Yehuda's opinion is that if we're scared that you might do something, it's us to do it. Therefore, it's us to make a bow because we're scared you might make a knot, which is contradictory to Yehuda's opinion regarding the case of the egg and the oil. Why, when it comes to a knot, Yehuda says you can't make a bow because you might make a knot. But when it comes to oil, Yehuda says you can fill up the oil, no problem. And we're not scared that you're going to take oil away. Why is it sign that we're not cheshish? And so too, kasha, the Rabban and Rabban, we have the question all the way around on Rabban's opinion. Why? Because Rabban say that when it comes to the case of the oil in the egg, when you're filling up the oil in the egg, Rabbanan say it's fine, it's aser because we're scared you're going to take oil from the egg. So we see Rabbanan are choshesh that a person might do something that he's not supposed to do. And when it comes to the case of the knot and the making a bow on Shabbos, Rabbanan say there's no problem making a bow, and we're not scared that you're going to make a knot. So if, in other words, on Shabbos, it's either yes or no. Either you're cheshish that you're just scared people are going to do stuff. Either you're not cheshish that people are scared to do things, and you can't contradict each other unless you're going to answer, which we're going to answer right now, the difference between each specific case. Then we thought it's more of a general idea that are you cheshish for people to do things or you're not cheshish. Now we're going to answer each case separately. Says more like this: there's no contradiction between Rabban and Rabban. There's no contradiction between the case of oil, which you see Rabban are cheshish, people are going to take oil, and the case of tying a knot, which is scared, which we're not scared that if you make a bow, you're going to come to make a knot. Why is there no contradiction? Because shemen b'shemen machnis. The oil, meaning oil, is one thing. Yeah, the subject of oil is one liquid, and therefore the oil you use during the whole year, the whole week, is the same oil that you put inside the candle. So there's a big chash that the oil that you use, that since in your mind, what is oil? You're so used to using oil, so you don't differentiate between the oil inside the egg and the oil you use for your frying pan. It's the same oil. It's a different place. So therefore, there's a chash that you might just jump into the oil, take a spoon, take some oil, and use it. Because in your mind, oil is the same concept. I don't look at where the oil is. I look at oil. I'm used to using oil. I see oil. I take oil. I don't pay attention to where it is. But when it comes to tying a bow on Shabbos, aniva b'kshir le'michlav, a bow and a knot. So I'm not cheshish that I'm through making a bow, I'm going to make a knot, because a bow is a different type of idea than a knot. And therefore, I want to say, when it comes to the oil, it's the same item of oil. So therefore, we're cheshish that you might use, instead of using the oil from a different place, you use the oil from your candle, which is awesome, because it's the same item of oil. When it comes to tying a bow, Rabbanan don't say that you're going to tie, since you've made a bow, you might come to tie a knot. Because a bow is a different concept than a knot. They have no connection to each other. So that's how we answer Rabbanan's spirit. And the Rabbi Yehuda like Kasha, and the question on Rabbi Yehuda is not a question. The Because time is Rabbi Yehuda lavish from the Gazan and Niva Atuk Shira. Yeah, we asked that the contradiction of Yehuda Lechera when it comes to the oil, Rabbi Yehuda says it's mutter. When it comes to tying a bow, Rabbi Yehuda says it's asin. Why when it comes to oil it says mutter, and when it comes to a bow it's asin? Because the reason of it Rabbi Yehuda says about bow is asin is not because lavish from the Gazan and Niva Atuk Shira. He's not gezer that the reason why making a bow on Shabbos is asin because you might come to make a knot. The reason why he says to make a bow is asin because he holds that a bow itself is a knot. He's arguing the concept of what a knot is. According to Rabbanan, a knot is a strong knot. A bow is a different concept than a knot. Builder says not. Builder says that a bow is a knot by itself. A bow itself is a knot. So how can you tell me that you should make a bow to tie the string onto the jug? A bow is a knot, and therefore it's awesome from Kshira and Shabbos. Says the Gemara, "V'rami the Rabbanan and the Rabbanan." I'm going to ask a contradiction between Rabbanan and Rabbanan. Okay, then I was getting a bit carried away with this case of the jug. That we said before, Rabbanan said that if you have a string that snaps on a jug, then you have to make a bow to connect to the Shabbos, to connect it. Says the Gemara that we have a contradiction to that. That now I'm learning a brayso, koshnin li bepiska. The person is able to tie a jug to a well. The piska. Piska is a very thin string. It's a type of string it's not the usual string you use for tying jugs to a well. So therefore, since you anyway Motzei Shabbos, you're going to look at your well and you're going to see that there's an irregular string over there. So therefore, you're for sure not going to leave it there. So you're able to tie this string, a string, not a rope, a string to a jug of Shabbos, because Motzei Shabbos you're going to take it off anyway. Yeah, it's a more of an expensive string. Since it's a more of an expensive string, so you don't waste it on using it to tie jugs to wells. So therefore, in your mind, you're for sure going to take it off Motzei Shabbos, and therefore it's not going to make kasher shakayam because the knot you're making now is only going to be for a few hours until Shabbos is over. That's all if it's with a piska. Piska is a certain type of string which is more expensive. You can't tie it with a chevel. You can't tie it with a rope. Why? Because a rope is more of a stronger string and it's less expensive, and therefore you're going to leave it there. And since you can leave it there, it's us. It's going to be a kasher shakayam. It's going to be us, and it's going to be there permanently, and therefore the knot that you made is a permanent knot, and the kasher shakayam on Shabbos is us. That's Tanakam's opinion. But Rabbi Yehuda says that's mutter. Even with a chaver, even with a rope, it's mutter to tie. Okay, the Gemara is going to ask in a second. We didn't finish our question. We're holding the middle of the question. We're just trying to figure out what the case is. Which type of string are we talking about? This string that Abbanan says it's us and Yehuda says mutter. Which string are they talking about? If you tell me it's a normal rope, it's the regular rope you use to tie the jug to the well. So that doesn't make sense because if you're the matter, how can it be say it's mutter? Kasher shakayamu, the value is tuli. It's a kasher shakayamu. You're for sure going to leave it there. It's a regular string to tie jugs with, and therefore how can we say it's mutter? So we can't say that the Mishnah is talking about a regular rope. So what's the Ella Shita the guide? You're talking. It must be some kind of chevel the guide. The chevel the guide is I don't know how you call it, a sewing thread. It's a thread that you use for knitting or sewing. It's more of a thicker thread. And this is what they're arguing about. That what? That Rabbi Yehuda says that it's mut. Why? Because the chevel the guide, a sewing thread, no one's going to leave a sewing thread to leave it by as well. He usually needs it for sewing. So the Rabbi says as soon as you're going to put it there, you're going to remember Motzei Shabbos to take it off, and therefore it's not going to be kasher shakayam. But Gaz Rabbanan chevel the guide, otu chevel the alma. But Rabbanan say it's us. Why did Rabbanan say that maybe if you're going to be matir to use the chevel the guide, you're going to use this sewing thread. You might eventually come to use a regular thread on Shabbos. And if you use a regular thread, it's going to be us. From here we see that even though there's two types of thread. Remember, going back to the case of Rabbanan being matir to tie a bow on Shabbos. So we answered the reason why Rabbanan are matir to tie a bow on Shabbos is because a bow is a different type of knot than a regular knot, and therefore you're not going to come to confuse them. So we see Rabbanan hold when it comes to different items, we're not chesh, you're going to confuse them. So over here we have a clear contradiction to that. Because Rabbanan say you cannot use a sewing thread on Shabbos because you might come to use a rope. Now, a rope and a sewing thread are two types of thread. What's the difference between why is a bow different to a knot any more than a sewing thread to a rope? So when it comes to the case of bows, I want to say you could tie a bow because it's not similar to a knot. And you're not going to confuse it. When it comes to tying a thread, which type of thread you could tie on Shabbos? So we Rabbanan basically say any thread is usher because any thread you might come to use a rope. So that's a contradiction. So the Gemara in Chavel b'Chavel Michla. And ropes, you can get confused between this type of rope and a different type of rope because they're all different ropes. And they have a different image of a rope. One is a sewing rope and one is a normal rope. But when it comes to strings, everyone could get confused between different types of strings. But aniva big shir michtav, a bow and a knot don't get confused. Why? Because a bow is a different type of knot than a knot. When you're tying a knot, especially after Allah, but a knot has to be. You're tying a strong thing. A bow, you're tying it in a different way. We're not cheshish that if you're making a bow, you're going to want to make a knot, because if you're making a bow, you make it for a specific reason that should be more loose, and it has a different image to begin with. So therefore, we're not cheshish, you're going to come and use one for the other. Says the Gemara. Okay, we're going to stop over here. At the bottom of 2 lines on the bottom of Yudav and Aleph. Any questions?